Welcome back to the Contacts Coaching Podcast. We are joined today by Rudy Bentley Jr., Director, PGC Basketball, Assistant Basketball Coach, variety of places, former college athlete. Coach, thanks for joining us today.
Much appreciated. Thanks for having me. Excited to talk shop, talk hoops, talk coaching today.
Let's dive into this. Historically, I lead off with a question that's more pertinent to somebody that is a site-based coach, but given your background and what you do professionally and the majority of your coaching career, we're going to do it a little differently, and we'll get to those questions. But right now, do me a favor, ground the audience. Who is Rudy Bentley Jr.? How did you get into coaching? What's the life path, the journey that's led us to where we are now with each of the stops along the way, and what's consuming most of your time as we speak?
Great question to start off. It's an interesting question. I think some people that I've talked to just felt like they were born to coach. They either come from coaching backgrounds or they just knew when they were really young that's what they wanted to do. I had absolutely zero interest in coaching in my youth. Never thought that it was a career path that I'd want to follow. In fact, I thought I'd be a really bad coach. I was one of those leaders that was a little bit, I would say, I guess, demanding of my teammates and didn't always get along the best with everybody as a player. And so, I would be a terrible coach. And honestly, it wasn't until I was about 19, I think about 19 years old, the first time I worked as a camp counselor with PGC Basketball. I went there as an athlete when I was in high school. And honestly, I was just talking to my director that I had went with, a guy by the name of Chad. And I was asking him how to avoid that sophomore slump in college. And I went in, was fortunate enough to start as a freshman. My first year in college, was on a good team and was basically asking him, like, how do you avoid that sophomore slump? And told me, he's like, the best way to learn something is to teach it. Why don't you come teach with us? And I thought he was joking. So I just laughed it off, like, funny. But seriously, give me the answer. I don't know what I'm supposed to do right now. And he's like, no, I got a spot on my staff. It'll be 7 weeks this first year. Just if you want to come through and travel around the country and teach basketball with me, I'd love to have you. And man, I love PGC. I thought it helped a lot. I learned a lot there. I like Chad, and I thought he was a great mentor. So I was like, if anything, maybe I can sneak in some extra workouts. I'd be surrounded by hoops a lot. Maybe I just get better as a player. And 7 weeks later, I was sitting there thinking, okay, one, I actually really enjoyed that. There was something about seeing the light bulb go off, like you give somebody some coaching or give them a concept and kind of help them go through the process and just watching like that euphoria that I felt as an athlete when I finally worked through something and figured it out. And just watching that happen for so many players, gosh, that was really fun and really rewarding. And there was something there that I liked. And then I also found that I was good at it. There's obviously a lot of work that goes into being a coach, but there's also just things naturally in life where you find things that you're just a little bit more talented in than others. Like maybe I would have loved chemistry, but if I loved it and I knew how good I was at it, that would be a poor career path because I was terrible in chemistry and I had to work really hard just to pass it. There was this mix of I liked it. To my surprise, honestly, I liked it. And there was a natural ability to connect and explain the ideas. And so I was like, let me try it again next year and see if I still like it and if I can get any better. And that was my entry point. And then from there, I did decide at one point in time, you know what? I think this is actually what I want to do is the idea of teaching and coaching to an extent with that. And so I just started to try to gather as much experience and different experience as possible. So I was like, all right, I don't want to just do this one thing. Let me do as many different things as possible. I wanted to be a PGC instructor. I wanted to be a director one day. I wanted to be an assistant coach at the college level. I wanted to maybe be a head coach one day at the college level. I wanted to assist in high school. I wanted to run a player development program. I wanted to coach in AAU. And so I just started to dabble in a lot of different things and just seek out opportunities where I could go and get different experiences coaching and teaching. I think one, just to gain overall experience because I was so fresh. And I was like, I know that there's a lot of different ways to do this. So let me go be an assistant for people and watch. But the other one was just, I knew I had an idea that I wanted to teach and coach, but I had no idea at what level and what medium I really wanted to do it at. And so I said, I'm young. Let me just go out there and try a bunch of stuff and throw a bunch of darts at the wall and see what stuck. And so that was my journey. There's been a lot of different paths and different things that I've done over the course of the last 11 years now. But that's the why behind it all. Has just been, hey, let me go and try to gather as much insight, as much experience, and as much range, you could say, as I possibly could before I try to stick myself into one kind of lane and ride that out. So I hope that answers the question.
No, for sure. And if you could give a little bit more detail to what some of those things have been. I know you and I talked about the AU program you worked with. We just talked about how you're helping with this high school. you were a basket instructor, now you're a director. Just give a little bit more color to a handful of the things that you've done that have stood out, and then I'll follow up from there.
For sure. It really started, I think I started technically as an assistant coach my senior year in college when I was still playing. So played D3 ball. A lot of you know how that is. There's not a lot of funding. A lot of your assistants are part-time. And so I got a job, don't know how I scored this, but got a job as my head coach's office assistant. So I was getting paid to be his office assistant and just help him with emails. If recruits ever came on visit, I'd be the one to show them around, them and the family around. So I got some free meals out of it too, which is cool. But I was his office assistant. And then through that, some of my hours, it was just like, hey, I know the film stuff and the film breakdown and the scouting reports take a lot of time. I need to know them anyway. Can I just do them? And so he started off just showing me the ropes. We did the first few together. Then I would do it and he would check it. And eventually we got to the point about halfway through the season where it was just, I did the scouting reports. I would talk through player tendencies and write all that stuff up and get their stuff. I would talk about sets and actions and how I thought we should cover it. And he might offer some different thoughts, but we would always discuss it beforehand. So I really got my first step into coaching when I was still playing, which is really cool. To just really shout out to Brian Vraney for that, just giving me that chance as a senior. It was a really cool experience. And then from there, as soon as I graduated, I ended up jumping right into the GA spots and assistant coaching realm. So I did 2 years of collegiate basketball as assistant coach at the Division III level under a guy by the name of Coach Aaron Onenson, awesome guy. And just, he really was so generous in terms of allowing me freedom and range to experiment with different things. It's everything from recruiting coordinator, developing our recruiting lists and funnels, to scouting reports again, to fundraising, to just our culture. So he allowed me to generate our pillars of our team culture, create PowerPoints, give talks, etc. Like really let me run with that piece because he knew I was passionate about it. And so went through that college coaching realm. And then after a few years of that, I jumped into the player development and the AAU stuff where I moved across the country, came down to Atlanta, Georgia. A guy by the name of Sam Allen was running a program down here and came in and helped him with that. He had one team at the time, one team with 11 players. And over the course of about three or 4 years, we grew it to 19 teams. And so grew it fast. So that was just the scalability of how do you take coaching and scale it? How do you take the player development and scale it where it's still a high quality product and still getting players a lot of individual touches, but obviously reaching a lot more players? And so just from the building of a basketball business standpoint, that was a new avenue for me and allowed me to experience that. And then the PGC stuff really picked up. I was a director starting in about 2018. And then I started working with the basketball development team where I got a chance to have a hand in the curriculum, offer suggestions, make a lot of changes, curated a lot of our film for all of our different courses. So I got to be a synergy junkie and just sit and do hours of film work and just study the game. And then there's been other random stuff that I've done as one-offs. Like I spent one preseason as a practice player for the Atlanta Dream. I was fortunate enough, one of my guys, Gilbert Abraham, I was running some for a sports agency. He was running their NBA pre-draft stuff and ran their pro days at the NBA Combine. So he allowed me to come and be an assistant for him at that in 2023. So there's been other little things that I've done here and there just for new experiences, but I wouldn't want to say jobs. They were more like fun asides that I got to do on occasion as well. But that's been the journey so far.
Perfect. So I want to go right to transitioning from a basket instructor, site coordinator, whatever you were doing, to becoming a director. And for those of you that don't know, it's the equivalent of going from being an assistant to a head coach. And I want you to time machine yourself back to that moment and think about what did you realize right away that you needed to figure out after you'd been mentored by Chad, after you'd been around these other really good leaders and you were ready, you did the leg work, you'd been a college assistant, but now you are no longer a recommending body, you're a decision maker. What'd you realize you had to figure out? And you were like, whoa, okay, I wasn't really ready, but let's get into this.
Yeah, I think that's the first piece, right? It's like ready is a very strong word for that role. For those of you that don't know about PGC, it's a big camp. And so we run 5-day camps in the summertime where there's anywhere from 100 to 200 high school aged athletes there at one given time. And there's usually one director with a number of assistant coaches, our basket instructors, or camp counselors. And so I was a camp counselor for a number of years. And when I moved into that director seat, one thing that I knew I was going to have to figure out that I knew I didn't have figured out yet was my voice as a director. So I had gotten a chance to follow one director for a long time. That was my guy, Chad Sanji. And then after I followed Chad for a while, I had a chance over the next few years to watch other directors deliver the same curriculum. And what I saw was they were all really good and they were also all very different. And I think that's the great about any coach, right? Is all coaches, you can have multiple different coaches that are very successful in what they do, but they might do things extremely differently, not just their systems and strategies, but like how they communicate with players, what their standards are, et cetera. And so what I realized was there's going to come a point in time once I have my own sessions as a director that I need to find out what my voice is. What are the things that I value? What are my pet peeves? What are the things that I do really well naturally? And what are the things that I need to be very aware of because they're not very natural to me? And so I knew that was a tension I was going to have to manage, but I had no idea what it was. And so the first year, honestly, a lot of it was a lot of trial and error. And I think just realizing how vulnerable that is to be finding yourself in front of hundreds of people every week. That was a unique experience because as a college coach, I got a chance to find it, but I had months to gain rapport with people. So the first week might feel a little awkward, but the second week felt better. The second month felt better. And as you went through time with people, they just learned you and you learned them. But at a camp setting like I was in, I had 5 days. So I really was testing things out week to week and kind of being vulnerable with different stories I tell about my career or just the way I deliver things. And I wasn't super confident in it because I didn't know if it was going to work or not. And so I was finding myself in front of hundreds of people every week. And that was a big adjustment, man. It really was. I think that along with just the weight of having that many people in your care and in your charge, they're overnight camps. So parents are dropping their babies off at 1 o'clock on a Monday and they're picking them up at noon on a Friday. And they are in my charge and in my care for that entire time. And whether something happens on the court or in a classroom or in the dorms or in the cafeteria or anywhere in between, like the buck stops with me as the head coach of the session, the head coach of the camp. And so I think that was feeling that weight was something that I hadn't felt fully before. But it keeps you up at night, some sleepless nights. And I'm sure a lot of coaches that are listening right now could probably relate to that as well.
I want to go into what you started with, was just finding my voice. And one of the things that I've been fortunate enough to observe over the last couple of years, because I get to cherry pick which sessions I go to, and then I sit with you guys while we're debriefing the evening, and you're training a new director and talking through how they're going to deliver something. And I saw it last year with Dustin and Ice, and then this year with you and Brent, and then I got to see Brent later in the summer run his own session, and this idea of voice and authenticity. Can you talk about, let's just call it hacks? Obviously, you got to go through time and you got to figure out who you are. But what have you learned training new directors, helping basket instructors grow or assistant coaches grow to help discover that voice, right? What is the process? What are ways that coaches that are new in the game trying to figure out their own voice and identity can apply some sort of formula or some sort of technique? What have you learned about that? Talk through how that process served you individually and how you have paid that forward as you're trying to grow these other directors.
Yeah, that's a great question. There's two initial thoughts that come to mind. One is simplicity, and I think I'll get a little deeper in that. But the other one is just being real in the moment. And I think there's a difference between being real and being authentic. And I'll touch on that as well. But let's start with simplicity. It's really hard to focus on how you do something until you feel very sure about what you're doing. And the curriculum in point guard college, for example, there's different courses. Each course has its curriculum. I think I see a lot of directors, newer directors, they see a veteran, somebody that's been doing it for 6, 7, 8 years, and they see how detailed and how narrow they can get in certain pieces and how much extra value they can add than what's on the slide. And they think that they should go out there and do that as well. And the reality is they shouldn't. The reality is go learn the curriculum and just, for lack of a better term, hit the single. Don't go out there and try to hit a home run and feel like you have to be the master of this thing and have all these intricate details. Just go out there and hit the single. Make it as simple as possible. What is the bare minimum in terms of knowledge of what you need to know and be able to deliver that at a high level? Because once you know that and you have this baseline, the reality is just knowing the curriculum, just knowing what your offensive system is. If you have 10 possible layers, if layers 1 through 3 like the back of your hand, that's more than what your players know. And so if you can just get the simple stuff down, I know this I feel confident in, this I feel good in. Now I can take those 3 layers and really focus on how we're doing it. Because now I have an eye for when things go wrong. Now I have an eye for when things go right. Now I know, because I've seen it enough times, when things go wrong, what should I do to fix it, or how can I help? But until you really have a good feeling on what you're doing, it's really hard to focus on how you do it. And so that was my first piece with a lot of our directors. You probably even heard me say that phrase: just hit the single. Don't worry about going and hitting a home run. Just know the baseline of this stuff. And I think that's the first piece that I always start with, is just keep it simple, hit the single, don't try to do too much, know a very limited amount, but know it really well. Um, and then the second piece of that is just that idea of authenticity versus being real in the moment. I think sometimes I see people try to be authentic to a idea and not to who they are. I am an energetic person. I'm going to be authentic, which means I always have to bring high energy. And I think that's a dangerous place to be in, because some days you don't have that. And the reality is that people can sense when things are being faked or not authentic. And so if you put yourself in this box where I am this person, this being, this idea, now I have to show up as that idea all the time. And it doesn't allow me the freedom to be a human being. And so I think just being real, if I am trying something for the first time, hey, we've done a really good job on layers 1 through 3. I'm about to implement layer 4 and 5 today. And I know that this is the first time I'm teaching it. I think, especially if you've layered in 1 through 3 really well, I think my belief is it's actually not only healthy, but I think it's a good idea to bring in the players along in that journey. Hey, this is gonna be something new. I'm excited about this, but I haven't done this before. So I just want to preface it by saying that let's go through this together. We're gonna learn this together. If you have questions, please ask me. But this is gonna be the first time that I'm teaching this thing. And so let's go through it and let's get after it. I think you're ready for it, which is why I'm ready to do it with you. You've done a great job with the first 3 layers. So let's do this together. Y'all ready to do it? And just that realness of, I am not exceedingly confident in what it is that I am about to do, but I want to do this with you. And I think that idea, just being real, players can respect that, and that vulnerability there can actually help them connect to you more. And so I think being real versus trying to be authentic, sometimes I know that's missing words and it might seem nitpicky in terms of the word choice, but I do think sometimes it matters, because I see people put themselves into their own box and they corner themselves into a corner, and then now they got to sit there and show up in a way that's not real, and the players sense it, and then they seem like they're not authentic by trying to be authentic, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And I don't think it's mincing words at all. I think the way I'm hearing it, and what comes up for me is, as a 25-year high school teacher at this point, or as a 25-year team high school coach at this point, what you're describing is the difference between experience and being new to something. And the more experience you get, ironically enough, the more willing you are to say, I don't know, let me figure it out. Versus when you're young, it's almost like this fake it till you make it advice we always get, which is probably the worst advice ever. You got to come in with, to your point, enough understanding and confidence to do something simply, but also enough awareness to what you don't know, and to not pretend you do know that stuff, and to just be vulnerable in day one and tell the kids, I don't know, like, it's my first time doing this, like, we're gonna figure it out. But no one ever wants to do that. But if you were to give them advice, it's probably, that's the best thing you can do, because the kids know.
100%. And I found that same thing with consulting. And so, like, when I moved down here, in addition to the AAU and the player development, I also consulted with a lot of high school teams here in the greater Atlanta area. And I remember when that was brought up as a part of the job duties when I came down here, and I didn't feel qualified. Like, I hadn't worked in a high school. I hadn't taught high school basketball. I hadn't even worked a ton with high school athletes outside of a PGC session. I coached in college. I played in college. I hadn't been around high school kids in that long of a stretch in 7 years. So, and that was when I was one. So I didn't feel a whole lot of expertise. Yes, I felt like I had a decent understanding of the game of basketball. I felt like I knew how high level players trained, either from things that I learned or people that I watched. But in terms of applying that into high school, I think the one thing I realized really early was just like, every level and every medium of basketball is just so drastically different. It's, oh, that's a great digital media artist and that's a great painter. Yes, they're both great, but if you put them in the opposite person's shoes, they would suck. And I think there's a level of humility that's needed there where it's just like, hey, you're the expert with your team. You're the expert with high school basketball. You're the expert with your current situation and strengths and limitations in terms of what your administration allows and the number of assistant coaches and who you have access to. Like, you are the expert in everything that when it comes to your program. I'm just here to poke holes and ask questions and then offer some anecdotal evidence of things that I've seen work for other players and other systems in different contexts. So, like, everything I say here, I say very loosely, and I'm here for discussion. I'm here to ask questions. I'm here to serve in whatever way you want. But in no way, shape, or form, as the consultant here, am I the expert in this field. You are the expert in this field. I am merely here as an assistant coach. I'm an extra assistant that sees things externally. And I think that was a lot better received because as a 24, 25-year-old, if I'd have came in with these 45, 50-year-old head coaches that have been coaching in high school about as long as I've been alive, how jarring that would be, but also just how irritating would that be to have this kid come in here and try to tell you how you're doing your job wrong. Like, I just didn't feel right doing that. So I think even as a consultant where you're supposed to be an expert, I still think that at a high level of, hey, I'm not really sure. And these are just ideas. I think that mindset really helps.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the concept of expertise for a second. And one of the things that I think when we were in Alabama earlier, we were just kicking ideas around and I framed it the same way for you. It's like, dude, I don't care. Like at the end of the day, here's what I see, like running up the flagpole. It might work, it might not. This is your deal. I'm just a consumer. But I'm having conversations around coaching right now, right? And you have your idea of, okay, I'm going to build out my staff as the athletic director. I got my volleyball team, and it's okay. We have 45 girls this year. We've never had more than a varsity and a JV. And it's, I got 4 coaches. I'm trying to find more coaches. I want somebody that can be here all the time. I can't find anybody that can do that. Okay. So now can I get somebody that can be here 2 days, another person that can be here 2 days, okay, another person can be here 2 days, and you're duct taping this thing together. And you can look at it one of two ways, which is this is a janky fly by night operation, or actually what we're doing is bringing more voices in, more humans in that these girls then might be able to connect with and have their lives influenced in some way, right? So it's okay, your way of thinking, how do you zoom out a little bit, right? And so dealing with that situation and then dealing with the situation of, okay, as a head coach, I'm adding person X to my staff. I've got 30 years of experience of this is how I want to do things. But now, how do I deploy that assistant to add value in the ways in which the kids can benefit? And it's, they don't know the offensive scheme as well as I want to, or the defensive scheme, but it's like, what can I give them that's theirs that then is helping grow them, but also allowing them to have a real impact on the athlete? And how do you juggle that balance, right? So all of that framing to say this, what have you noticed about when you get basket instructors, which isn't what it used to be, right? It's you might meet someone you've never met and you got to figure out who they are,
Mm-hmm.
what they know, how to bring them up to speed. And you probably get some people, because I've seen them at these camps where like they don't have an extensive basketball background, but they love what Point Guard College does. So they want to contribute.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you utilize that beginner's mind? And then I had a conversation with another one of my coaches where I have a relationship with the Naval Postgraduate School, and we get military officers that want to coach. And I dialed one up for one of my coaches, and they were like, they don't have any expertise in this sport. I can't use them. I'm like, they're a naval officer. How can you can use them? Like, they don't need to know the sport. No, they need to know the sport. So point being, like, talk a little bit about your own philosophy on that, what you've seen, how you've changed your mind, what you've been able to do to enhance the life of the athlete, which is really what we're about.
For sure. Now, great question. And I'll preface it by saying it's not easy and there's no perfect way to do it. I think the more I've seen high school sports in general and just seeing how things have to get put together, I think there's value in being flexible because more than anything, the thing I found is when you have the right people, whether they're there 6 days a week or they're there 2 days a week, they're going to have a positive impact. If you don't have the right people, it doesn't matter if they can be there 6 days a week all day long, they're the wrong people. And so I think when you're talking about the job. And the job, yes, is to try to win games and teach them skills on the court or on the field or on the pitch that'll help them. But the big thing is we want to help them become not just better players in their sport, but better leaders and better people. And those last two things in particular are really dependent on the type and quality of people that you have around. And the teams or the programs that I think have found the most success in those latter two things of better leaders and better people, they've really fought to just have the right people around and they figure out the rest. So I think that is a part of it. That's, again, my perception. That's my opinion. But that's what I have noticed is just like better people will out regardless of how many days they can give. Now,
Really
when it
quickly,
comes
before
to,
you pivot
yeah,
on
yeah,
that,
go ahead.
I think you're
Yep.
dead. I think you're right. It's what I've tried to embrace, and Jim Collins talks about it in Good to Great, right? Where it's like, get the right people on the bus and then get them in the right seats. But anyway, back to what you were saying.
Yeah, I think that's my belief, and I think glad we're aligned there. I think the other piece of that is, and I talked with our president CEO yesterday, actually, this, and he mentioned this idea and brought it back up, and I thought it was good. Alignment in the majors, and then there can be some variation in the minors. In the majors, what are we trying to get accomplished? In preseason, what are the things we need to get done? At the end of the season, what would wins be? And I think alignment on the major things. What are the most important things to you as a coach? What do you want to get out of this thing? Why do you coach? What is the purpose of this program and what we are trying to accomplish? When you're trying to find the right people, I think alignment there is a non-negotiable, and it needs to be from the jump. That that's really hard for me, in my opinion, to get somebody on the bus with a core pillar of what we're trying to do. I think if we're not aligned in terms of our core and our essence of what we're striving out there to do, then every single minor thing that we try to do after that is going to be splitting hairs because we are not seeing the same board. You are seeing our opportunities from a different lens. And so we are always going to have differences in opinion in a lot of our minor things because we just don't see the majors in the same way. Now, I think there's an element as a coach, and depending on how young your program is, depending on how confident you feel as a coach, depending on a lot of different factors, you need to really figure out which of the minors, for lack of a better term, are majors to you. Of these little things, right? Okay, culture is important. What are the things that are talked about pre-practice and post-practice? What are the standards in terms of like how we celebrate one of those things in terms of our culture, right? Are those things something that you feel like this other person is capable of managing with their skill set and is that something they can do? Maybe they don't know basketball, but to your point, right? For my programs, showing up on time, being disciplined, having a solid work ethic, being team first, those are all very important things to me. If I had a naval officer on my staff, best believe I am passing that off because I actually don't think I'm the expert. I think they are. And you might not know a lick about basketball. Don't worry about it. Dribble, pass, and shoot. You know those words? Cool. Use them when you feel like it. Other than that, go teach what you teach. And I'm going to get out of the way. And I might offer some different terminology on occasion just to make sure it's aligned with what we're talking about. But in terms of holding a standard there, you got it. And please take that away. And so I think when you find people that are aligned in the vision, usually they're actually pretty confident in something. It might not be X's and O's. It might not even be defense. It might be offense. It might not be offense, but it might be defense. It might be culture. It might be team chemistry. There are certain people that are just really good with EQ and they can read body language and how people are feeling. And they can be the one-on-one conversation haver that keeps people on the bus when they come to the bench and they're all frustrated. I'm not good at that. If I go talk to them, they're probably not going to play for the rest of the game because I'm going to say something they don't like. And then I'm gonna get frustrated. I'm like, all right, cool. That attitude, you can sit there. I'm not the person that should do that. So I think once you find people that are aligned with you, it's your job as a head coach to figure out where they fit and then put them in those spots, put them in the seats, for lack of a better term, like you said.
Look, I'm gonna just echo that, and I have my microphone off, so the audience couldn't hear me laughing. But I'll tell this to anybody that's listening: as a head coach, one of the most important roles is the assistant coach that gets the role of, hey, go talk to Jimmy. If I talk to him, it's not going to be good. That's your job when they come out. I don't want to deal with it. I'll talk to him tomorrow after the game.
Honestly. And I'll just be honest. That was one of the cool things about AAU. There was one season, it was during the pandemic year at the end of that when they allowed us to go back and play AAU. My wife was my assistant coach because her EQ was off the charts. And like, she just knew, like, she would see it before I saw it. Like, hey, as soon as you sent so and so over there to check in, they knew it was for them and they were pissed off. So you might just want to be aware of that. And do you want me to talk to them? Yeah, please do. And so they come off, and sure enough, I'd see when they come off. They don't come up to the front. They don't high five me. They go to the end of the bench and I see her go. I'm like, okay, she's got it. Like, so like sometimes it's like my wife didn't watch a basketball game, I think, all the way through until she came to one of the games that I coached. Like she knows nothing about basketball at all, but she knew that and she could tell when somebody was upset. And that helped.
That's awesome. I love that. All right, let's pivot here. Pick any of your stops along the way. You're people that don't understand point guard college don't really understand the culture that you're in. So this question is going to be a little bit wonky, but answer it however you want. And the way I usually frame it is if you were the head coach of a program or an assistant or whatever it was, but it's like, what's the best thing you do in your program that has the largest ripple effect on culture? That were you to leave this job, you would take with you no matter what, right? And again, your entire job is about developing that. So it's going to be hard to pick and choose. But thinking about the things that you are able to use with your AAU team when you had it, or when you're consulting right now at this assistant gig, what are you bringing? Because you can only do so much, right? So what are the best things that you can offer that are tangible, that someone can adopt, that it's, look, man, do X, Y, and Z, and it'll solve 90% of your problems?
For sure. That's a great question. And it's funny, I've actually had to think about this recently, just helping out with a particular high school team now a little bit more exclusively. And so they've been asking me to bring some things in, and I've had to pick out, like, okay, what are the things that I'm going to bring? I think from a culture perspective, having very clearly defined terms. And so the terms are like the buckets, and then having specific, tangible things to hold them accountable to within those buckets. I think the first illusion of culture is assuming that we have one. With culture, it has to be shared. Like a culture is a shared thing. It's shared amongst people. So if I ask 15 players on a team what your team culture is, and they have 15 different answers, you don't have a team culture. You got a bunch of different ideas. And so having the culture be extremely clear. What do we define as our culture? What are the buckets or what are the pillars of our culture that we talk about? And then not just having those words, but then within those words, what are tangible things that we hold ourselves accountable to within those buckets? In PGC, we talk about shape. Each letter in shape stands for a different thing. So the S is spirit, C is communication, H is hustle, A is approach, P is precision, E is enhance. When we talk about spirit on day one, classroom one, it's okay, spirit. What does that mean? Spirit is the energy you bring to an environment. How do you show up when you walk into a space? What's the energy you bring to that thing? And how do you bring positive? Do you want to bring positive or negative energy? We want to bring positive. Why? Because positive energy elevates human performance. Okay, if that's the case, then how do we do that? High fives is one way, chest bumps is another way, individual handshakes is another way, giving energy in the back of the line or cheering somebody out when they do something right, that's another way. So we give them, when we walk into a practice, there's 6 tangible things that we should be seeing the moment we walk into practice. Are you saying things in the back of the line? Are you high-fiving people when they finish something? If somebody makes a great pass, are you celebrating that? When they make a shot, are you celebrating that? So we have this idea, here's a pillar of what we do, it's spirit, it's the energy we bring to an environment, but there's tangible things that we can say yay or nay. We did it or we don't. And having those things that we check in on daily, having everybody be on the same page. Like we teach shape in the first classroom of the first day at PGC, and then we reference it in every classroom and every court session the rest of the week. So by the time you get to day 3, I'll put it up on, without even putting it up on the board. Hey, the S in shape stands for, and 150 athletes that didn't know it 3 days ago can all yell it out without thinking. And I think that is such a powerful thing, because when you have a shared idea of what everybody's supposed to be doing, and then you see other people doing it, it's like positive peer pressure. This is the expectation, and I see others doing it, so I'm also going to do that because that's what we do. And there becomes this pride in it, but there can't be pride in something that everybody's not very clear of. And so I think that's the first piece: clear alignment, clear terminology, and then clear deliverables within those buckets of things for your culture. So that would be one.
No, I like that. And I think ultimately where this question goes and the answers I've received over the years, right? There's these tangible tasks. I forget exactly what you just said, but right, you have
Yep.
alignment in the vision, you have the way in which you're defining the terms and the different things you can do to hold the standard, and then you have these different things that contribute to it. So like one of the things that we do that like I do with all my teams is we hug as a group before practice and after practice, every single person before game, after game. Super generic, super simple, but as someone that coaches young men, we're not taught to emote in society. So it's, hey, how are we breaking down these boundaries? And when I switched to the girls this last year, I didn't want to do it because I was super overly conscientious about boundary violation that I didn't do it. And going back to be real and be authentic, it was something that was valuable to me. It's how I built culture. And halfway through the season, it was like, hey, look, girls, like, I would like permission to do this. It's always been super important on this side. How do you feel about it? Yeah, it'd be great. And then that was like a transformational moment for us. For whatever reason, as silly as it is, right? There are things that you can add that are going to impact that. And so, to your point, define what they are, figure out these tangibles, but then it's got to all interweave together in your personality, right? So, if your personality is your freaking Eeyore, talking about spirit all the time is probably not going to win you many battles. Talking about effort and hustle, right? That's probably one you're going to land on.
And that's going back to finding the voice, right? That's so important. And I think that's one of the things I talk about with a lot of observing coaches at our sessions, because I get the question a lot and it always leads to the same thing. Okay, so like that drill, can you give me that again? Because I'm taking that and bringing it back to my practice. Okay, time out. Before you just take the drill full stop and take it back to your practice, why? Why do you want to take it back to your practice? Does it really align with what you run offensively? Does it align with what you teach outside of that? And in terms of the energy and the spirit pieces that you like to watch, is that something that you feel comfortable with holding the standard on? Is that really you? Is that really your program? Is that really your team's culture? Or is it like I saw it at a clinic and it was cool, so I'm taking it full stop? And it's just, I always talk about if you went and watched Boeheim run his 2-3 zone stuff and you try to go take it, but you got a bunch of 5'8", 5'9" guards, your zone might not work the same way his does because his point guard's 6'6". It When you're starting 6'6" to 7 foot, then you can run the way they run zones is a little differently than if you got a bunch of people that are my size running around out there. It's a different thing. And so whether it's culture, whether it's systems and strategies, I just always encourage coaches, like going back to that idea, you got to know yourself and figure out what you believe in and what you like to run. And then also just being honest, like you're only going to be the second best version of somebody else. That's just the reality. Like you have to find what makes you tick. And when you figure out what you like, you figure out what you can hold the standard out, you figure out what you're good at teaching. You might borrow bits and pieces from other people, but at the end of the day, like you can only be the best version of you. You can only be the second best version of somebody else. And so you really got to be careful on borrowing or taking full stop without understanding if that really fits into what you want to do and who you are.
First time I've heard that. Bar, this will be very challenging, but I'm sure you can rattle them off. I'm going to put you on the spot because my summer notebooks are pretty thick, and a lot of the things that I repurpose are phrasings that I have gleaned being around you and Chad and Dustin and Tyler and everybody else. So give me your top 5 statements that are similar to what you just said off the top of your head, and they don't actually have to be your top 5, but just rattle off a couple and share some of these sound bites that are so powerful that just adopting them and using them has a transformational effect. And one of the things I'll just give you that's super generic and horrible, but as a parent, I love it. And I use it with my kids and my athletes. It's like one of the things I got from, I want to say it was the college course. Hey, life's not fair. Foul. Life's not fair. Deal with it. And it's okay. That's super simple and super generic and also annoying, but how quickly does that shut down complaining, right?
Yep,
And how do you
100%.
utilize things like that, right? So give me your list right here, coach. Give me a few. Stop whenever
I like it.
Look, what do we got?
Let's see. Here's one. What you permit, you promote. Here's a quote from Rudyard Kipling. If you don't get what you want out of life, you either didn't want it that bad or you tried to bargain over the price.
Dig into that one. Dig into that one.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people, players, etc., they say they want something, but then the work behind it doesn't necessarily match. And so it's like greatness is never on sale. I think that's the basic idea. To become great, it takes what it takes. There's no shortcuts. There's no sales price. There's no quick fix. There's no discount code. It is what it is. And it's either you save up and you sacrifice and you pinch pennies and you pay the full price for it, or you didn't really want it that bad. And so I think I always use that analogy with Jordans or Kobe's. I'm a sneaker fanatic. So it's, listen, those Kobe's are never going on sale. And so either you want them and you're going to save up and stop spending money on dumb stuff, or you don't really want them that bad and you're good without it. And I think it's important to know the difference there.
That was a good one too. All right, what else? Give me a couple more and then we'll pivot to another question.
Oh man, let's see. There's so many of them. Now you're putting me on the spot.
I know, and it's usually like for everybody listening, I have accumulated a ton of these over 25 years that I've
Hmm.
stolen, that I've appropriated, whatever. Coach is the same way, and these come out in the appropriate moment in coaching and teaching. And this is the hardest thing in the world to put you on the spot, but I don't care. Life's not fair.
Yeah, I got one for you. I appreciate that, and you're correct, which is why I'm coming up with one on the spot. I appreciate that pause right there. Here's one from Albus Dumbledore and Harry Potter. It's one of my favorites for young kids and athletes in particular. It takes a great deal of courage to stand up to your enemies, but a great deal more to stand up to your friends. You can read into that as much as you want, but the general idea is just the hardest thing actually for young people is when their friends are doing the wrong thing to say, no, I'm going to do the right thing. And there's always that moment as they start going down that path of life, they get to middle school or high school, and there's this fork of some of my friends start going on one path and doing the wrong thing. And I got to decide if I want to stay on the path that I know I should stay on, or if I want to stay comfortable and stay with my friends and not rock the boat. And so I think that idea of what courage really is, and that it's actually harder to stand up to the people that you like versus the ones you don't like. So there's
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, no doubt. Our former chaplain that actually passed away my senior year, and we still quote him 30 years later, and he always talked about choosing the hard right versus the easy wrong.
Yep, man, that's so good. And I think the I'll give you one based off that because I think that was a perfect example. This is for coaches. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. So taking difficult concepts and making them more difficult doesn't make you an expert. Taking difficult concepts and making them easy to understand makes you the expert because you have such a profound knowledge of this thing that you can disseminate it into its essence. That quote is from Gilbert Abraham, one of my mentors. Um,
That one, if
you
for
know,
coaches listening, is I have made it a point over the last 8 years probably where I was the varsity boys basketball coach and I coached the middle school girls. And ultimately, it was a practice in what you just said, simplifying to a point of sophistication, and then being able to go back and utilize what I learned teaching less developed and talented players concepts, and then how to simplify them for the more talented and more experienced players.
love that. Yeah, that's honestly coaching fifth grade basketball for a few years taught me more as a coach than my years as a college coach ever did because it forced me to really understand the concept at such a basic and fundamental level and be able to deliver it. So I agree with that fully. I honestly think that some of our best coaches actually teach at the quote unquote lowest levels of basketball. That's another hot take. But I do think, in terms of not overall basketball knowledge and concepts, but I think the actual ability to teach the game, I think some of the best teachers of the game at any level is actually at the lowest levels because they have the ability to take these big concepts and break them down, literally dumb it down so much that a fifth grader can understand.
No doubt.
And I think one more I'll give you, and this is one that I give a lot my players a lot and talk about a lot, is live in a way that creates curiosity. And so I think a lot of times we try to convince people with our words, but you're way more convincing with your actions. If I have to convince you that my way is the right way to do it, that's a uphill battle. But if you're asking me how I did something, I already have you. Like you're already sold. You're ready to buy. The money's in your hand. I just have to decide if I'm willing to take the time to actually give you what you're asking for and take it from you. But like once you ask me, and I think I found that whether it was on my religious journeys, on my basketball journeys, on my coaching journeys, when I watched somebody that I wanted to be like, and I was like, ooh, there's something different about you and the way you carry yourself and the way you speak to people and how intelligent you are and how good you are at what you do. I'm curious to figure out how I can do that. And so I think as a player or as a leader, right? Like, how do you just show up consistently better than other people or differently than other people so much that people just start to ask you how you do what you do? And I think that's so powerful. So there's another one: live in a way that creates curiosity. Man, I'll send you over a list. I got it somewhere
Yeah.
in my computer and I have
Oh,
to find it, but there's a
I'm
bunch of
sure
them out
you
there.
do. But okay, let me pivot on this because one of the things that we were just talking about is coaching fifth grade basketball or younger or whatever. So I spent 4 years coaching travel softball and learned more about coaching in that time that came back to basketball than I did in my previous 15 years. And my question then, as the ultimate anti-sports specialist, and when we first got on and you're like, oh, I'm going to practice, I'm like, dude, it's August. Like basketball starts in November, right? Because I'm at this age and stage in my life where I firmly believe and that people should put down what they're doing and go have another season of something else. And we'll talk about that another time. But all of that to say, what have you learned watching other coaches, other teams, other sports that aren't basketball that you've then been able to apply to your basketball journey? Because what I am convinced of is we do not expand the lens as often as we should into other disciplines to get better at ours.
100%. And I'm sure you've mentioned it before, that book Range by David Epstein. Just if you are interested in that idea of kind of cross training, definitely a great book to read, not just for sports, but just for life in general. And just the idea of what things dance across different disciplines and what things can translate from one sport to another or one context to another. I learned way more from coaching from teachers than I did from coaches. I learned way more about basketball from soccer coaches than I did from basketball coaches. Just ideas and concepts in terms of like movement, spacing, unselfishness. And you see it translate like in football, like soccer. That idea of player movement, ball movement, spacing is done at such a high level there, in part because like you can't really beat one on whatever the number of players are in soccer. It's too big of a space, there's too many players. And so they have to share it. And you see that translate into basketball for the players that play in Europe, because soccer dominates those spaces. And so they grow up playing it. Even if they don't major in it, they minor in it, and they play it in some way, shape, or form. They watch it. They have their favorite club team. So like that idea of sharing the ball and that beautiful idea of getting everybody involved and moving it and it being a team concept, that bleeds into everything that they do. And there's a reason why the ball movement in Europe is far superior on average to what we have in the United States. So I think watching that, studying that, and then taking tactics when they talk about different shapes on the field, different strategies, like there's so much stuff there that I've tried to take and put into basketball context, and it makes things really cool. And I think football, like a lot of people are like, oh, there's only certain sports that translate. Football is not one of them. I firmly disagree. I think as a football player, I played football, and being a football player made me a drastically better basketball player, especially as a smaller player, because I got the ball in my hand and there's a 6'6" guy guarding me and there's a 6'5" guy over in help side. I got a very small window right here that I got to be able to get through. And there's going to be a level of contact and physicality. And I need to fight for my line. I need to stay low. I need to stay under control of my body. I need to be able to cut an angle and cut sharply and drive a foot and keep going through the contact. You go out there in football and play straight up, and you learn very quickly to not do that. You know, you play straight up in football and you end up on your back and you can't breathe because somebody just took your ribs out. And now you're like, okay, I need to get my shoulder down next time or else this is going to hurt again. And so I feel like I learned a lot in terms of seeing angles, attacking things quickly in the moment, being decisive, going through contact and not to contact, keeping your eyes up and reading the next level. Because if I get past this defender, there's going to be another person trying to come hit me right after them. So I can't just see them. I got to see who's coming after them because I got to have a counter for them when I get past. So I think I learned a lot about reading defenses and layers of defenses through football that I would not have had and I didn't have before I started playing. So there's always something you can take away from another sport if you pay attention. And I think that's probably the biggest thing for me is just, it's not just experience, it's evaluated experience. And I think that's the value of great coaching is we can help them take and learn how to connect the dots. That's the teaching part. What did you learn from track and field that can translate to this summer in AAU basketball? How did you train your sprints? How did you train your strides going into your high jump? How did you train? What did they do? How did they load coming up before an event? How did they load it 5 days out versus 2 days out versus day before? What did you do to warm your body up? Because AAU is going to be very similar. You're sitting for a long time, and then you got to go out there and you got to perform at the highest level. So what did you do to get yourself warmed up? Helping them connect the dots is essential as a teacher if we're going to have them maximize that experience of range.
No, that's awesome. I love the way you phrase that in regards to the learning takeaway. What did you learn from this that you can translate? And I think, again, often we fall into the trap of provincialism and kind of the echo chamber of my sport. And it's zoom out and look at how these other people are doing things and how we can take from that. All right. What have you most recently changed your mind on? And it doesn't have to be related to basketball. This goes to your growth mindset, your Carol Dweck, right? Like, how are you continuously challenging your belief system, and what is it that you can put a pin on or put a finger on here, Rudy, that is something that, I don't know, in the last 3 to 6 months that I used to be over here and now I'm over here and here's why?
It's a great question. Honestly, I think Some of it's had to do with parenting and just my relationship with parents. I think I recently had it. So my baby girl turns 1 on Sunday, this upcoming Sunday. And so I've been a parent for about a year now, which means in my mind I've been a parent for a year and 10 months, because you know how that goes. Like the moment you find out you're having a kid, it's like you start planning out their college fund and their whatever, like everything, just their whole life flashes before your eyes. So I've been thinking a lot about that. And then going into this summer, I think my mindset on parents has shifted a lot, where a lot of times I've viewed parents as selfish in a sense. Hey, I'm worried about this entire team and you're just thinking about your kid. And that's a selfish way of thinking about things. And I think, no, that's not a selfish way of thinking about things. That's actually an important lens to keep everybody, because as a coach, it's really easy for us to get not cold, but like a little bit callous to the individuals that we are dealing with, because we're in charge of the whole ship. And when we're in charge of the whole ship and making sure that the ship stays afloat and is going in the right direction, we can really easily lose a pulse on the crew and the folks that are making it happen and the folks that we're in the service of. And so by having these parents that do obviously care a lot about their kid, because they're their babies and they're the ones that signed up and they're the ones that pay the bills to make sure that these things can happen. And they're the ones that have to care about the long-term effects of whatever it is that we do. I think it's actually really important and healthy for parents to have a seat at the table. I think what that seat at the table looks like and when those conversation happens and how, I think all that is a definite part of the conversation. However, to say that parents should just like, all right, if you trust me, now sit over there in the corner and don't say anything. I actually don't think that's not only not realistic, I don't think that's actually healthy for the overall growth of what we're doing. Because at the end of the day, transformational coaches that want to make an impact, we're not perfect, and we can very easily lose sight of our individual pieces as we try to get the whole going. And I think parents' role in that is to make sure we don't forget about the players and their personalities and who they are as people. And so that's probably been a big shift for me as becoming a parent and just seeing, yeah, I do view things differently and I see where they're coming from now. And I understand that, yeah, I spent 3 months where I got 3 hours of sleep or less, you know what I mean? And so after going through all those trials and tribulations, I want to make sure my baby is taken care of. And that's not a unreal, not unreasonable. That's actually a very valid concern. So I think that's been my biggest change, is seeing parents as less of an obstacle and more of a part of the process, a valuable part of the process.
Yeah, and I would reframe just a touch and say we want to partner with them in
Yes.
helping to grow the subject, right? The athlete, the student, the worker, whatever it happens to be. I think you're right that I've said this to parents. It's look, your job is to have them at the center of the equation. My job
Mhm.
is to have the group at the center of the equation. So it's ultimately how are we seeing this and working
Mhm.
together to make sure that they have role, they have value, and at the end of the day, they might not have the role they want, but in life, this is another steal, right? You train for the role you want and star in the role you have, right?
Yep. 100%. 100%. And it's, I think when you can frame it that way, it takes some of the pressure off, because I think this is the reality too. A lot of parents don't realize that the most competitive person on 95% of teams is the head coach. So I think the head coach, I don't think they realize how badly the head coach wants to win. Like you could go and win a game, and if your kid plays bad, your kid's going to be upset. They're going to go home, whatever. You could go out there and lose a game by 20 points. But if your kid had 25 points, you're going home and you're good. Yeah, we lost, but I played well and whatever. That coach is still going home and watching film that night till 2 o'clock in the morning and getting yelled at, come to bed, hang on, 5 more minutes. Like, people don't realize how incredibly competitive coaches are. And so the reality is, we want to see your baby win too. Like, we would love nothing more than for your kid to go from the success story of end of the bench, 30 for 30 guy, only coming in when we're up 30 or down 30 in the last 30 seconds, to being the star of the show the next year, because they make such huge strides that I can't keep them out of the game. I would absolutely love that, but I can't do it for him. I can't just give them the minutes. I need them to go out there and put the work in and do the things that are necessary. Here's what they have to do. I need to give you the structure, but I would love for them to do that. That would make me extremely happy, because that means we're going to win more games too. So I'm not anti your baby, but your baby's got to do the work. And if your baby don't do the work, I can't play your baby. And that's where I think that, so that idea of we're in this together and let's find a solution. And then if they don't want to put the work in, then it's Rudyard Kipling. Either you didn't want it that bad, or you're trying to bargain over the price. And my playing time on my team is never for sale.
Right.
it's always full price.
That's no doubt. I love that. All right, one more question, and then we're gonna wrap it up. What is, I don't even want to say the best, most recent best. What's a new tool you've put in the toolbox that you've had a lot of fun playing with lately?
Yeah, I like, so there's a stick method, spacing, testing, interleaving, and then categorizing. It's just, I got it from Doug Lemov, who's the author, teaches coach's guide to teaching or something like it. Really good guy. But this idea of randomly interleaving mental things within physical workouts. So we'll teach a concept, and let's say we're talking, like, one of the things we talk about with our two-man actions, whether it's ball screens, dribble handoffs, chase actions. In every two-man action, and again, trying to simplify it, right? Every two-man action, you have three options. You can use it, you can refuse it, or you can slip it. So we just give them that basic idea, right? So all of a sudden, we'll be in the middle of some small side game, three on three or whatever, and it's a DHO action. And we're going through about 30, 45 seconds in, and I'll pause it. And I'll be like, all right, Justin, you have 5 seconds to answer this question. If you do, your team gets an extra point. What are the three reads that you have in a DHO? Go. 5, 4. And if they can rattle it off, then it's, hey, you got an extra point, because I want them not just going out and hooping. I want them thinking, and they got to be able to interleave. So take this idea and then remember it in the flow of a game setting. And so I just randomly throw in these mental components during the physical play where they tie in, because it's forcing them to have to think as they play. So I've been experimenting with that at the workouts. It's been fun.
Love that. That's a great way to end, Coach. Thanks for being on today. Hopefully, I didn't get in the way of you picking up some tools from Ace Hardware, but appreciate you jumping on and making the time to do this.
For sure, man. Appreciate you having me. It was a blast. And yeah, look forward to connecting again soon.